So the first thing for us to do is assemble the bracket for our CPU cooler. So because we've got an LGA 1700 motherboard, we're going to need the Intel backplate and the little bag of screws labelled Intel LGA 1700. And what we're going to do, we're going to take the backplate with the Intel side up and we're going to pop these screws through the middle hole in the bracket. Then we turn our backplate over and then we can take one of these little plastic spacers and push them onto each corner. Then all we need to do is line the bracket up with the back of our motherboard and it should fall through the holes. We're now ready to start working on our IO, and the first thing to do is set our fans onto the radiator. We're then going to use the long radiator screws that come with the IO to secure the fans to the radiator. Now importantly, when you are setting the fans onto the radiator, you're going to have the end with the cables coming out towards the back of the case. And all we're going to do is daisy chain the fans together. They've got this proprietary connector on them. So it's just a matter of lining them up and pushing into place. So this one connector is going to allow us to control both the lighting and the speed of the fans. And we get this cable with multiple connectors on it included with the IO in the box. And we're just going to go ahead and plug it in to the spare connector here. So on the ends of this cable, we're going to have two very familiar connectors. We've got a 4-pin PWM connector, which we're going to plug into our CPU fan header, allowing us to control the speed of the fans. And we've got a 3-pin 5-volt A-RGB connector, which is going to allow us to control the lighting effects on the fans. Both of the A-RGB and the PWM connectors have additional connectors coming from them. So this A-RGB one, we can pull this protective cover off, and we've got an additional 3-pin 5-volt A-RGB header. And in terms of our PWM connector, we've got a spare connector here, and these are for our pump. So coming from our pump, we've got two cables. The first is a 3-pin 5-volt A-RGB cable, and we're going to be able to plug that into that additional header on that cable coming from our fans, and that's going to allow us to control the lighting effects on the pump. Again, this cable has an additional A-RGB header on it, so if you did have another device and didn't have enough A-RGB headers on your motherboard, you are going to be able to plug something else into here. The other cable is a standard 4-pin PWM connector, and that is going to allow us to power the pump and control the pump speed. And if we take a closer look at our pump, you'll notice it has a built-in fan. I can remove this cover here, and you'll see they've got a fan here, and the same PWM cable that is going to control the pump is going to allow us to control this fan, and this fan is designed to help cool our VRM. This all cover is rotatable, so you can put it whatever way you need, and it will simply just slot into place. So you're going to have the ENERMAX logo up the right way no matter which way you install this. Next, we're going to need to install the bracket to our pump, which is going to allow us to secure it to the motherboard. Because I've got an Intel motherboard, I'm going to be using the Intel bracket. There's a separate one for AMD in the box with the IO. And all you're going to do is line it up and push it into place. And you can see our AIO has got thermal paste pre-applied, so when we're ready to install it, all we're going to have to do is remove the plastic protection. So I think once we've installed our IO, the top access to the port to the top of the motherboard is going to be limited. So for me, it makes sense to plug the cable into our CPU fan header and an A-RGB header at the top of the motherboard before we install the radiator. So I'm just going to bring the PWM cable through. This is our CPU fan header, and I'm going to get it plugged in to it. I'm also going to bring our A-RGB cable through. And then we'll just make sure we pull all the excess cable through to the back. Next, we can set our IO into place at the top of the case. Just before we install our IO, there's some plastic protection on the bottom we're going to need to remove. So I'm going to be installing the IO with tubes over to the right-hand side. So I'm just going to take these cables and just route them around the top bracket, which is going to help organize them coming up to the top and making sure they're not getting caught on the cold plate, which they're not. And then it's just a matter of lining the bracket up with the one we've already installed on the motherboard. And then we're going to want to get a thumb screw onto each corner. Okay, now we've got a thumb screw in each corner. It's just a matter of tightening each corner up in turn. Next, I'm just going to pass the cables coming from our pump through to the back of the case. We've got some plastic protection on the IO to remove. And then we can replace the pump cover. To help organize the tubes coming from the IO, we get these little clips that come with the IO in the box, and it's just a matter of popping them over each tube. Now, I'm not going to use these. I think the tubes are actually sitting quite nicely. And the problem is when you put these on and off, they actually cause fraying of the tubes themselves. Not a big problem if you're doing one build, but if you're building with the same IO multiple times like I do, I just don't want to damage them. Then we just need to get our cables plugged in. So we've got the cable coming from the fans and the radiator, and we're just going to plug that into our multi-port cable that we've already plugged into our motherboard. Okay, that's those connected up. Next, we've got the PWM cable coming from our pump to plug into that PWM port on the multi-port cable. Okay, that's it connected up. The RGB cable coming from our pump to plug into the RGB port on the multi-port cable. So the multi-port cable we've already plugged into our motherboard, into a PWM header and an ARGB header. If your motherboard doesn't have an ARGB header, ENERMAX have got you covered. They include this little ARGB controller with the I/O. This end plugs into a SATA cable coming from your power supply to power it. On this end here, we've got a 3-pin 5V ARGB header, and that multi-port cable, rather than plugging into your motherboard, you simply plug into here and you'll be able to press the buttons on the controller to adjust the ARGB effects.